so it's really exciting. I just love to build things. At the end of the day, I just like to build things and put things out in the world and to create. And so whether that's creating functions of business and on the operations side, I love that, or whether it's actual campaign building and everything on the marketing side here at Press, I just love it all. So.
Wanna cause no problems. I just wanna live my life, but I keep on hearing about nonsense. Me and my dons ain't mobsters, but you know when you see imposters, we know how to read them faces, same way you know how to read them comments. If you wanna talk, let's talk, but around here, make sure you walk and your talk is constant.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Death to Vanilla podcast, and I'm very excited to bring to you John Cantu today. He is the head of marketing at Press, and part of the reason I have him on here, and I'm so excited for you guys to watch this podcast, is he has lived in both worlds, right? He's had his own business, which I'd love for you to talk about, John, and then he is now head of marketing at Press, which is a fairly large company, one that I love going to here in Arizona for the locals listening, and so it's exciting. He's learned a lot, especially on the eCommerce side, and just learned a lot of lessons that I'd love for him to share today. So, John, thank you for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Sweet. So tell us, so I kind of gave you like a brief overview, but tell us a little bit about your history of work, both touching on your self-employment as well as what you're doing now.
Yeah, so my wife and I co-founded a wedding photography company and did that for 8 years together. So that was never actually something that I did as my full-time role. So in tandem with that, I was also in sales and marketing at a software company and have just always kind of lived in the corporate / starty up world, I guess you could say, as a wedding photographer. But on the wedding photography side, that's kind of where my marketing journey started, with just doing our own social media and the stuff on our website, things like that. It's just you got to do all the things. But then on the software side, where I really kind of cut my teeth in like corporate marketing, was in SaaS. So lots on lead gen, content marketing, things like that. Fast forward, I left that software company after about 4 years, and I actually came to Press to join their marketing team, but I was only there for about 6 months before some friends of mine who had a coaching startup recruited me to go run operations for their company, and so I actually did that properly for 2.5 years, running operations. That was a 3-person company, and we had some part-time people in contract employees and things like that. So at one point we were 7 or 8 people, but that's where a lot of my kind of business operations, and I didn't own that business, but really entrepreneurial kind of experience came from. There's marketing associated with that as well. I mean, we started that company with just in-person coaching. The founder was a therapist turned coach, and we ended up launching an e-com arm of that brand with an actual physical product, and that was a really exciting thing to be a part of. But now I came back to Press at the beginning, almost exactly a year ago, as the head of marketing. So I oversee all of the marketing for the company. So we have 19 retail locations. 7 of those are inside Sprouts Farmers Market. And like we were talking about before the call, we have a really growing e-com arm of this business as well. Myself, and then another guy on my marketing team here, Matt, who runs the actual website and builds and all of that, do that together. So it's kind of been a linear journey and trajectory, but living through it really kind of felt up and down and windy, and was running the wedding photography company. My wife was doing it full time. I was basically doing it part time, doing full-time jobs here and there, doing freelance work on the side because I just enjoy the craft of marketing so much. And it's really exciting now to be at Press and in such a hyper-focused kind of way, because I loved running operations at the startup that I was at. I really love business development and all those parts of business as well. But my true creative side really gets to be explored doing the marketing here at Press. So it's really exciting. I just love to build things. At the end of the day, I just like to build things and put things out in the world and to create. And so whether that's creating functions of business and on the operations side, I love that, or when it's actual campaign building and everything on the marketing side here at Press, I just love it all. So
right. That is quite a journey. Certainly, going from marketing to ops had to have been a bit of an adjustment, even with a lot of experience going into it.
Mhm.
Why did
Yeah,
you
well,
end
it's
up?
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, go for it.
I was just gonna say how I ended up in that is just I'm one of those weird people who kind of is like a creative that's like halfway to like a type A analytical kind of logistics type of person. So very systems oriented, and that's kind of how I approach marketing in the first place. So what happened with that startup is I joined. And it was just the three of us, and so a majority of my responsibilities joining the company started with like the marketing side. They wanted to produce a podcast, so I helped with that. And within like the first 3 weeks, I had presented to them a marketing system that I called it agile marketing, kind of like, and this is actually apparently a thing. There's books written about it or whatever. But I drew from my experience in SaaS of agile framework, and I said, hey, let's
Yeah.
approach the way that we do our marketing, our campaigns, in this sort of kind of structure. And they said, why don't we do this for the whole business? So what ended up happening is we discovered Traction by Gina Wickman. I don't know if you're familiar with the EOS method,
Very.
but they were like, I think that you're an integrator, which I would agree with on that end. And so I was the integrator at that company. And to me, when I read that book, Traction, it was different words for the same thing, which is what agile, the method is for software developers, just kind of translated to business development. So I ran that whole company on EOS. We run on EOS here at Press as well. I'm not the integrator here on the Press side.
Right.
Obviously, I focus on the marketing team. But the way that I run the marketing team, we still actually have our own like IDS, and we have our own internal scorecard just for the marketing side of things. So I just think well in those terms. But then I'm also, I grew up playing music. Went to college on a jazz band scholarship to play drums. So I've always had that kind of creative side of me and the artistry side as well. But I just have learned to hone like my temperament through systems and disciplines and things like that. It's just been really helpful for me.
I resonate with that so hardcore. Like, because I have a similar background in music as well. I played piano and guitar for a long time.
Yeah, nice.
And I do, like, when I read Traction, because someone had recommended it to me, and I read it and I loved it. Loved it,
Mhm.
loved it, loved it. And it was really my first exposure to like a business operating system. And so, it was like firing every neuron in my head in excitement of just learning something new. But it was really funny because I ended up taking the test and I kind of scored in the middle between a visionary and an integrator. And so people will be like, is your inbox at 0? I'm like, yes. And they're like, well, that's kind of an integrator tendency. And I'm like, yeah, but I just don't. I also feel like it's tough when you're running your own business. You're wearing all the hats, and so I never
Yeah.
feel like you get to wear one of those in a way that like you can truly decide if that's you or not. Like you have to
100%.
integrate when you're running your own
Yeah.
business, and you also have to be the idea guy, and you also have to do this, that, and something else. And it's like, so I don't know if I've been in a role where like I could just be a visionary
Yeah.
or not. And
Yeah.
so, anyways, so that's really cool. I didn't know Press, basically ran on EOS. That's really cool. That's it's a major competitive advantage.
Yeah, I agree.
So how does that so is that part of what made Press such an attractive option for you? It's just like they kind of already was running on the ethos that you believed and had executed on, or like what kind of was
It's a good
the
question.
attraction point instead of maybe doing like another startup or something?
Yeah. Well, the reason I had come to Press to join the marketing team, and I was here for almost a year and just got to know the leadership team here. But the opportunity to go be a part of a startup was just too appealing to me, and it was something that I really wanted to do. So I did that, but I always stayed in touch with the owners of Press, particularly the owner that I worked directly with, Jason. And I think the attraction of coming back to Press and working with them, partly, yes, the organizational structure and the way that they operate is I like that, but it's I think working particularly with Jason and just the way that he approaches growing businesses and invests in other businesses, and it was kind of one of those like, I see where you're heading and I want to be a part of that.
Yeah.
That kind of made me want to come back. They're just doing really big things here, and the timing was just too perfect. We had launched the e-com side on at the startup. We were exploring different ways to grow that business, but it was also kind of like self-sustaining for a time, and it just made sense when I had reconnected with Jason, because like I said, we stayed in touch. Because it was a startup, we didn't have proper office space. We had a co-working space where he would see clients in person.
Sure.
So I'd go there a couple weeks downtown, but I was often working out of a coffee shop, and Press just happens to also be my favorite coffee, just objectively. Like, not even because I work for Press, but because it's just my favorite coffee in Arizona. So I live in Gilbert. There's a location that's not far from me where I live in Gilbert, and I was basically there most days of the week, and I would just run into them all the time, and he would always kind of make that joke with me, like, oh, if you ever want to come back, there's a place for you.
Right.
And when it kind of made sense, I said, hey, we should get coffee, and it just kind of made sense. So the attraction was really, I feel like I'm a little long-winded here, but seeing their trajectory, where they're headed, what the goals are, that they shared with me, and just wanting to be a part of that was really attractive, and so here we are.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense, and I feel like it's like kind of the reverse of what people say, which is like people don't leave jobs, they leave managers. And so for you, it's kind of like the opposite. Like, you didn't necessarily join just because of Press, but because, you know, the person you're going to work with and their vision is powerful. It draws people in. For sure.
And that's where it's funny too, because you're saying the halfway visionary, halfway integrator. What I've learned about myself is very similar. I feel like I'm somewhere in the middle, which is I feel like a way that I try to approach leadership is like I can provide some vision, and I can kind of see the future in certain ways, but where I really thrive and where I get really lit up, which is where I know that I lean a little bit more integrator, is when I connect with somebody else on, oh, here, I'm doing this and I have this idea, and it's like I always used to say this about myself as a musician as well. Like, as a drummer, if somebody came to me and they said, hey, I'm working on this lick, it's like, great, I have that. I could think of, this is what the bridge should be, and here's where we should go here, and here's where we should do a breakdown. But like, I could see the rest of it all kind of play out with that one piece.
Yeah.
If I had to and I was forced to, I could maybe do that on my own, and I have that creative side of me. But where my creativity really plays out is taking a fragment of somebody's vision and going, great, I can use my creativity in this regard, which kind of reads visionary, but to me, it's like 75% integrator in that way, because it's really just not seeing the future, but seeing a vision, and then seeing the 20 steps that are needed in a visionary type way to accomplish that vision. But I get really lit up when somebody else is like, I have this idea for this thing that's going to change the world. It's like, great, I didn't think of that, but I know how to make it happen.
Yeah. I feel like maybe that's it's so funny. You're like literally describing how my brain works. You're just way more accomplished than me. So, but yeah, it's kind of like that. You're an integrator, but you can still have big picture thinking. You know what I mean? Because I feel that same way, where it's kind of like I can view it at a 10,000 foot level, and then try to and see it with them. Yeah. And then figure out how it's going to work. And I don't know how it's affected you, but I know I have to be super careful that I'm not I can kind of end up coming across as like a negative Nancy for people, because it's like, oh, I foresee this problem, this problem, this problem. Like, oh, have you thought about this? And so I have to be careful not to pop the visionary bubble and be seen as negative, but rather I'm trying to enhance what's happening here, and these are the things that I think are going to stop that from succeeding. And how that plays out can be, I just had to be careful. So I don't know if you ever dealt with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think where I get caught up is I tend to think out loud sometimes. So what I'm really, this is what I'm trying to work on just in my own professional and personal life, is to that end, I'm thinking, oh, well, this will happen, but then this will happen, so we don't want to do this, so this will happen. And I can have a tendency to think out loud in that way, and then I know it can kind of get overwhelming, and it's I just want to be excited about XYZ or whatever. So that's actually, I would say, one of my biggest lessons that I'm working on currently, is how can I be the most succinct and know that I have all these other things in my head, and present it in a way that is just here's the top 5 things, and if you want to know the rest of the information, ask me, because I probably have it. My mantra lately has been, I don't have to explain everything to be understood. I've been really, I just write that at the top of my Notion to-do list every day as a reminder to myself, so that I don't. I mean, I've probably done some of it in this podcast today so far, just continuing on a train of thought after I've made my point. So that's been a big lesson for me.
That's really fascinating. Yeah, that's a cool. That's one thing I'm somewhat opposite on, is I'm an internal processor, and so the problem with that ends up being that people aren't sure how I feel about something, and they don't really know how I'm thinking through something, and so what ends up happening is they feel a little lost, and so because I'm kind of like piecing everything together like a puzzle in my head, and they don't know if I even like their idea or what's next, and then I get frustrated if they're like questioning my vision for it, and it's like it's because they have no idea what's happening because I haven't explained it. So that's kind of funny how that works.
I get that.
You're dialing it back, and I'm trying to. I even tell people, like, I just want to let you know I'm an internal processor, so if I take a second and it seems like I don't like your idea, there's actually a chance that I do. I'm just trying to figure out if it's going to work.
Well, I that's actually helpful for me, because I can think of people in my life who are internal processors. So to get the Reader's Digest on what's actually going on there is helpful.
Well, it's tough when, I don't know how many people do you have under you?
Well, it's me, our web guy, and then we have a graphic designer / social media manager. So it's just the three of us.
Cool. Yeah, it's hard. I was just going to say, it's hard when you're a leader, because what you say carries so much more weight than when you're just like a person on a team. And so for me, it's like I'm probably overly cautious on what I say, because I don't want, because some people take what someone says and it's like fact.
100%.
It's like the new thing in this direction we're going. And it's like, no, like this is my thoughts that I'm sharing, and I want us to tear them apart and figure out what's the best way to go. This is not like the new direction we're heading necessarily. And,
or it is the direction we're heading that day, but my mind might change tomorrow, and now I've decided a new direction. And deciding when to decide that it's time to start saying, okay, let's all rally together on this direction. So I totally get that.
Yeah, I got to give myself like a 48 hours thing. Like, I'm so excited about this idea right now. Let's see how I feel in 2 days.
Yeah, that's a great one. Sleep on it. There's science behind that.
There really is. So one of the things I think is great, like we're typically talking about this in like a business sense, like overall differentiation of a business is something I want each guest to unpack. But you're, of course, specializing in the marketing section. So like, what do you believe Press's differentiation is between all other coffee shops, and how do you actually end up going and explaining that in a marketing sense, right? Because marketing is just communication in a lot of ways. If you have a different perspective on it, let me know. But for me, marketing is communication. So then, like, how are you discovering it, and how are you communicating that to the world? So what do you believe is the difference?
Well, the differentiator between Press and, I mean, the natural question that most people who aren't familiar with like the coffee world would compare us to would be like a Starbucks or a Dutch Bros or something like that. What makes Press different of coffee companies is that we're a specialty coffee roasting company. So the specialty, that word isn't just like a gourmet or like those type of buzzwords. It actually has meaning behind it. So the way that the coffee world works, this will be just a little 30,000 foot view, is when you grow the coffee, there's this thing called a Q grader, and with all coffee, they'll rate the coffee on a scale of 1 to 100. It's an objective scale, meaning like if one Q grader here rates it and another Q grader here rates it, it should have the same score, just the way that it works. And so it's a scale of 1 to 100. Anything that's 80 points and above is considered specialty. Anything 79 and below is considered commodity, which is what Starbucks buys. That's what you'd get in a grocery store or whatever. That would just be 79 or below coffee. Anything above that would be considered specialty grade coffee. So we only source specialty grade coffee in all of our Press locations, which is going to be a big differentiator. So now you start comparing us to other really awesome coffee companies. So in Arizona, there's Cartel, and there's Mythical Coffee, and there's all these other coffee companies. Anytime you think of like a fancy coffee shop or one of those like hipster coffee shops or whatever, 9 times out of 10 they're specialty coffee. So it's not just having to do with making lattes and latte and all that kind of stuff. It has to do with the actual quality of the coffee itself.
That makes sense.
I give all that explanation because Press, as a growing brand, we have 7 retail locations at a Sprouts Farmers Market. So a big differentiator there, as opposed to like Starbucks inside of Target, is that we are properly a specialty coffee roasting company that's located inside of a mainstream like grocery store. So the equipment that we're using, the coffee that we're using, all of that is the same amongst all our stores. These aren't like featuring press coffee type stores or anything like that, and it's actual specialty coffee. So I give all that explanation because just saying we have really high quality coffee and that's what makes us different wouldn't really suffice. What really makes us different is the fact that we are a specialty coffee company at scale, and as we continue to grow, we're maintaining those standards of only sourcing specialty coffee. So if we were to be a nationwide brand, which online we are, we're always maintaining that specialty coffee differentiator.
No, that makes sense. I think you hit on something that I know I get annoyed when I hear, and people are like, oh, like, well, what makes you so great? Oh, we provide great customer service, or like we're, timely, or whatever else like that. It's like the garbage that like literally everyone says, but it doesn't actually mean anything because like there's no way to prove that, or like everyone says it, or what have you. And so it's good to have some qualifiers to when you say specialty coffee. What does it even mean? And then you're like, oh, okay, like the coffee that we're getting is better than, better than 80% of the coffee being consumed.
For sure. Yeah.
And,
so you translate that now to the actual like experience of like a customer inside of one of our retail locations. And one of the ways that we approach, like I know that our trainers approach like training our staff, is making specialty coffee approachable for anyone. So they'll say it in our trainings to those people, but it's like we want to be the coffee that's for the 20-year-old college student who wants, a $5 little cortado coffee or whatever, but we want to be the type of brand that can also, you can bring in your parents or your grandparents, and they're not going to feel stupid for the way that they order their coffee or the questions that they ask or something like that. So we're very specific in the type of language that we use with our customers. We try not to use a ton of, we use the right words for what information is in a store, but we try not to put anybody down for certain buzzwords or whatever they're trying to order. If they ask for a dark roast, we'll kind of somewhat educate on what that means in our world, but also like we know what they're talking about, we'll give it to them, kind of thing.
Right.
That's in terms of customer service, a way that we really want to make specialty coffee accessible to more people. So that happens in more ways than one. That happens in being inside of Sprouts and being available on a retail front, but it also happens in the way that we treat our customers and the way that we communicate our world to them, because we're inviting them into the specialty coffee world, and we don't want to push those people out. Everybody's welcome.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think no matter where I go and get coffee, I'm always surprised that during my visit, probably 1 out of 3 times, someone is in line who's like, at least sounds like they've never ordered a coffee in their life.
Dude, yeah, 100%.
And it's like, dude, it's freaking end of 2024. You've never gone somewhere and ordered coffee before.
Yeah,
but
sure.
at least, or maybe it's just like a new place or whatever what have you. But it's like, it's wild, like how that scary factor of feeling like an idiot the first time you go in and you're like saying the word venti and you don't even know what you're talking about, like is. Like, that's so far behind me that I forget that that's like someone's like tomorrow they're gonna walk into Press Coffee and feel silly, and like how someone responds to that and treats them, like walking through that like kindly is really a big deal, actually.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned something interesting. The Starbucks kind of model of ordering and all their buzzwords and lingos and ventis and Trenta and all that kind of stuff has kind of made it seem like it's a more confusing world than it is. Because like if you come to a Press Coffee location, our menu is pretty minimal. It's pretty minimal anyway, which is part of one of the things that I think is really important and from like a brand perspective. But we don't have a lot of those kinds of buzzwords. Like the extent of it is going to be the actual names of what the drink is actually called, like a cappuccino or a cortado or whatever. Kind of I think Starbucks, that world has done a lot of good for the coffee industry and making people be accustomed to paying a higher ticket price for a coffee and all those kinds of things. But there's also a little bit of confusion with some of that wording and stuff. So, yeah,
for sure. It's they're kind of like the reason it became a thing. It cracks me up because I don't know, you've probably seen it ad nauseum, but the Paul Rudd video of him, like the little clip. I don't know if you've ever seen it on social media, where like he goes to order a coffee and he's like, "It's not a venti because venti means 20, and this is
Yes.
24 ounces." It's so funny and
Yeah.
encapsulates the frustration of trying to learn completely. To learn lingo that is like completely ungrounded in reality, and you just kind of have to like know it, even though it's like not even true.
Yeah, for sure. It's more about, are you a part of the club, and
Right,
how do
yeah.
you get a part of I'm not a huge
Well,
fan.
that club's dwindling, so Starbucks is losing money and their market share is dropping, so sad for them.
Sad.
Well, I mean, I made a video like 2 years ago where I was like predicting that would happen because like BlackRock was coming in and killing it. Obviously, press was growing at the exact same time. I just wasn't aware of it, and it's like as soon as they took out all their comfortable chairs and made it so it wasn't a third space anymore, because drive-throughs were like their cash cow, but like clearly that wasn't like the only thing that mattered, because their business continues to dwindle. So.
Yeah, well, you'll see too. It's interesting you said drive-throughs, because no press location has a drive-through, and likely never will. Like, we intentionally get space that doesn't have drive-throughs, and that's kind of part of like the growth strategy of press, of like where our locations are. So you'll see a lot of them in like office complexes, obviously grocery stores, like I've mentioned. We obviously have our like standalone roastery as well, which is a whole experience. But it kind of takes away from the experiential element of the coffee shop and the cafe. Without having the drive-through, it's a little bit more. There's that personable aspect of it, but we are intentional about that.
Well, that's good to hear. I mean, like, I don't know how you guys label things, because it's been I just can't think of how you guys do it, but I just remember even when Starbucks went from like writing your order on the cup to printing out tags, and it was like the fun little things where like the barista would like write a little smile or have a good day. It was just like so fun, and then that just like went away, and it was like, oh, there's you just commoditized a commodity.
Sure. Yeah. Sure.
So as far as, obviously you've had a lot of experience behind the scenes. You've seen press grow pretty substantially, and even before we hit record, you're just talking about like some of the great things that have been happening from a e-com side. So as far as, every business owner is always like, how do we get more sales? How do we grow our business? Blah, blah, blah. So what have been some effective things that you guys have leveraged, whether it's been social media, whether it's been not social media, it's just been whatever? Like, how have you guys continued to gain exposure and get people connected with what you guys are doing through sales and marketing?
Well, on the retail side, our locations are all very strategically placed. So we have a location inside of the Scottsdale corridor. We have a location where I'm sitting right now inside the Biltmore Center on like 32nd Street, Camelback area-ish. So very strategic placing, and we've been around since 2008. So there's something to be said about the longevity of the brand and the exposure just in the valley. It really is kind of like a Phoenix staple in terms of coffee, just because we've been around for a long time. One of the owners, Steve, I'm convinced that he knows every single business owner in person in Arizona, because he's just such a good relationship builder. So I haven't been a part of press since the beginning, and I was not a part of all of that growth. So I can only speak to where our growth has been happening, this last year that I've been here. Yeah. But the brand success overall it's built on the back of retail and the brand that Steve built, and those three partners, Jason, Steve, and Alex. They have excellent relationships, excellent just like business development and commercial licensing and all of that, and the operation that Alex has set up. I mean, all of that success is to those three. So I'll say that. But in the last year, I'd say some of the biggest growth of what we were talking about. On like at least on the digital side, which I think a lot of people are excited about these days. Our website has been growing just like crazy. Our e-com side has been growing like crazy. And so the biggest like tactical strategy that I could share on that side would be the power of email marketing. So I run our email marketing, and the last I looked, it was like 47% of all of our e-com revenue is directly from email marketing. Now we have a list of like 102,000 subscribers that we've built. And we have people like signing up through our Wi-Fi portals and things like that in all of our retail locations. So we just have a steady incoming kind of amount of customers there. But email marketing has been like the biggest growth strategy that we've been using on the e-com side. So that's as high level as like we have 2 coffees that come out a week, and we send out a campaign, and we have like subscription promos. But that's kind of what people see the most often. But really, the strategy has been everything that happens on the back end, kind of automation that we use with like Klaviyo and with our subscription platform and reviews platforms and things like that. So I mean, I could get into all those details if you'd like, but that has been our kind of biggest growth lever that drives direct revenue, particularly for our online sales.
Well, that makes sense, and it's certainly not the first time that I've heard of the advantages of an owned audience, which is what email subscribers are. It's something that generally can't be taken away from you, like the rug that gets pulled out of people, out from under people, like with Facebook algorithms changing, and all of a sudden their reach is 0, or a quarter of what it used to be, and it's like that's the only thing they have to get their sales, and now they're screwed. And obviously, you guys have a kind of I wouldn't say a trifecta, but it's the word that popped into my head of like you have awareness through locations, you have a quality product and experience, which is 2 different things, and then you're building positive customer experiences on top of that's your base, which then when you go to ask for an email subscription, it's a little easier than it is for some rando, so that certainly is awesome. But of course, the fact that you guys are bringing so much in because you do email marketing, that's really cool.
Yeah, and then there's like some effects that happen after a purchase has been made, where email still drives revenue and then kind of ends up leading other customers back to the top of the funnel. So the first thing that comes to mind, because you were talking about social, so I just kind of want to paint a picture of how this all kind of operates. Some of the automation that we have set up in the back end of our marketing would be like, somebody just user reviews, because we have such a well-known brand in Arizona. At least we have a ton of organic like UGC that comes through, and so leveraging like automated emails from our e-com sales, meaning somebody buys coffee and then we send them a judge me email asking for a review, and we incentivize asking for a photo or a video talking about that we could then use on ads, or we can use on our social or whatever. That's kind of how it kind of recycles itself to end up going to social media or go back to an advertisement or something like that to drive new business on people that we've already done. Which is the reason I bring that up is because we have not historically invested a ton in like paying for influencers or creators or things like that, because we have a lot of that happening organically. So the way I approach marketing, at least, is I try to do like a bottom-up funnel approach, meaning how can we capture as much from the bottom of the funnel that's already happening, because those are already the hottest leads, if you will, that we can kind of capitalize on to drive revenue or drive awareness, and then look at filling the top of the funnel with things like cold ads and things like that. So
for sure, it's not a whole lot of point in treading water when you already have happy people that are sharing things about your company. You probably couldn't afford to pay for the amount of exposure you guys are getting through organic UGC. You know what I mean? Like, it's
crazy.
Yeah. So last big question for you is, being that you've been kind of like part-time in your own business, you've been part of a startup, now you're part of a very large local company. If you had to kind of like contrast your experiences with the 3, and kind of look at like, for a business owner who's watching, who wants to grow their business, how could you contrast those 3 different experiences, and what has that kind of like taught you that you would want to pass on to someone who's trying to grow their business? I know it's kind of a loaded, big, ethereal question, but
it's a big question. But the first thing that came to mind, like knee jerk, was just the power of moving fast, which I think is and being nimble and agile. I think that is, people say that all the time, but just coming, particularly like within the last year. Previous to this, I was at a startup that was 3 full-time people and then contractors and part-time people, and then coming into the larger organization. And I would say things move a little bit more slowly in the larger organization as things do. but we're just kind of started to kind of clarify roles, clean some systems up and things like that, and kind of trying to eliminate bloat and be as streamlined and as efficient as possible. And so that's really what comes to mind is like, how can each individual contributor kind of like max their capacity, meaning maybe they wear more than one hat, which is what you learn in the startup world and what you learn in like your own business is like sometimes like you talked about, you have to wear the creative and the integrator and all that kind of stuff. I just think getting a culture of people who are assimilated to wear multiple hats, which is something I think Press does really well, actually. There's a lot of people are willing to kind of jump in and get their hands dirty in other areas of the business that maybe they wouldn't normally, which is kind of one of the advantages of the size that Press is at right now. I mean, we're not like a Kroger, corporate type brand or whatever. We're definitely a larger business, but that a willingness to wear multiple hats and kind of having a culture of like every kind of level of employee stepping up to the plate, growing their skill set. It's only going to make them better, whether they're with Press for the long term or not. But really, that I think is the number one thing that Press does extremely well, which is like almost like being a startup but at scale, is everybody being willing to wear multiple hats and be agile, even with our growth and the speed of our growth. So that's the first thing that comes to mind.
No, that makes a lot of sense. That does have that startup energy feel where things are more collaborative rather than people just spending time justifying why they aren't the problem that their project is screwing up, which tends to be like, what happens 100%. When the business gets bigger.
And the that's like the lesson that I take from marketing into like a business development type thing. Like on the marketing side, you have like direct response marketing, and we can see I spent this amount of money and this is exactly how much it made or whatever. And I think that what tends to happen with what you were just describing is like you're just so focused on just like KPIs that don't matter, and you're just looking at like just all of these metrics and things, and this is how I adjust my time or whatever. But like what you can't do at a startup is hide. You either had results or you didn't have results. What you can't do in direct response marketing is hide. You either had a return on your ad spend or you didn't have a return on your ad spend, right? And so when you get ethereal from like a business operations perspective, because you're just trying to justify why you're supposed to have that position or whatever, that's where you start to get bloated, and that's where it starts to become a threat, because now you just have like this wishy-washy, like not really sure what this function is for or whatever, which I've experienced in other places, and like I've worked for a university at one point. It was very much like that sea of 100 people, and it was just middle managers upon middle managers, you know what I mean? Like that whole kind of culture or whatever. And so that's what's so cool about Press is like you can't hide in those ways, and you either have results or you don't have results. And I think that's like the biggest like business lesson that you could take away from that is like you can do that at the size that we're at. We have over 150 employees in Press. You can operate in those ways. It's just a matter of, that's why I have so much high praise for the owners here. You can only have that kind of culture if it's like a top-down, this is how the owners have decided to make the culture of the company. And that's enough said there. So.
No, that makes sense. I mean, if it's not the owners, then it's everyone else. That's what like oppression is. You know what I mean? A dictatorship. But when it's when the owners embody that, that's when it's like, okay, like this is actually like this is a culture. This is not just a policy. And I feel like that is one of the things that I do love. And I'd be curious what your thoughts are. Like that, it feels like that's an EOS thing. Like the EOS like accountability chart and some of those other pieces. Like do really lend to people not being able to hide, which I think is awesome. And like, like I get it, it's challenging to scale a company and do all those things. But I mean, to your point, it's like if everyone's not maximizing their contribution and growing, like what, people worried about profits from new business, but what about the profits from like people not wasting 30 hours of their week every week doing nothing?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, totally. Yeah, so, it's an uncomfortable thing, but I don't know if you've read The Hard Thing About Hard Things by, I think it's Ben Horowitz, but
I actually haven't even heard of that.
It's a good read. The Hard Thing About Hard Things. It just talks about the realities of what it means to grow a business. So, like, for example, it's a real kick you in the ass kind of manifesto about running a business, but there's a chapter in there about how, layoffs are always your fault as the CEO. You hired too much, or you had the wrong projections, or whatever. Like those types of lessons from somebody who's had a tremendous amount of experience. But some of it is like that having those uncomfortable conversations and like looking at the reality of a situation and making hard decisions, and like those are the types of things as a business owner you have to do. And that's part of what we did at the startup. It was an executive coaching company. It was executive coaching meets therapy. So it was specifically
which is the same thing basically.
Yeah, well, for that person, the whole kind of ethos of that business is like when you're on the top, which the people that we worked with were on the top or whatever, everything's your fault. You have nobody else to go to really kind of like process these things or whatever, because what are you going to go talk to your employee and say, man, I'm really struggling because I have this weight on me for having to fire 20 people. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like there's a weight to leadership that it sounds like a privileged thing to say, but it's like that's a population of people who need emotional support because they carry a weight that not a lot of people understand. And so there's that's that.
I mean, that 100% makes sense. I mean, I think that has been one of the sad things about our culture, not to get into the weeds too much with that, but I mean, like, that's, you'll often hear like a celebrity just like eventually just crumbles, and then they talk about what's going on in their life, and they're like nobody cares what a celebrity who's popular and has millions of dollars struggle with, but they're still people, and they still cry at night when nobody likes them, and they still read mean things said about them online, and like who do they complain to because no one else gives a crap. And it's like that same thing happens on the executive level. They're just not it's not like the fame portion.
Sometimes it is. I would say the thing is too, one of the cool things about that company is that yes, the community aspect of it is important, and who do you have to have in your corner on those instances, but also like what internally is going on with you as an individual that your North Star is potentially off or maybe slightly skewed. And so, I mean, I've dealt with this personally in my own life, and then you see this and you hear it in so many books and podcasts and things like that, but deriving all of your self-worth from your success is a recipe for crumbling. And in the fame kind of side of things, or like very easy on the professional sports side of things, you know what I mean? Tying your success, your worth, your self-worth to your success, eventually you're not going to be able to have that success anymore. And who are you when you don't have the NFL anymore? Who are you when you don't have the head of marketing, position anymore? Who are you when you don't own that business anymore? You know what I mean? Like there's countless stories of people who have had to realign their priorities and just decide what is important to them. That's really what we did at the startup, is that product that I was talking to you about. The end result of this written kind of 150-page workbook basically was what they called a one-page big vision. And on it, you went through a coaching created kind of questionnaire workbook of defining what's important to you, not what's important to your employees or what's important to your spouse or what's important to your shareholders or whatever. What do you care about the most? Where is your life headed? What's most important? What are your top values in life? Who is your actual tribe? And that's something I think every leader. I've tried to take it into my position here at Press, because again, this is the biggest position I've had at scale with like a company, and so I've over this time had to deal with those own kind of like internal self-worth and value kind of things as well, because it's hard, because it's also a huge dopamine rush when you do something that has the type of results that you see at a company like Press or whatever. It's exciting, the partnerships and the international collaborations that I've been able to be a part of and things like that. It's a huge rush, and it's hard to come down to, so.
It's certainly a cool thing to bring up at Thanksgiving. Like, what have you been up to? Oh, just doing international partnerships. Yeah, exactly. What about you? Man, it's like the guy who landed on the moon. You know what I mean? Like nobody wants to bring up what you've been up to that guy.
You can't really.
Well, cool, man. Well, thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing so many different lessons. I thoroughly enjoyed it. So thank you for taking the time. And if you'd like, where would you like people to connect with you or kind of see what's happening with what you're working on?
Well, definitely LinkedIn. I'm not crazy active, LinkedIn influencer or creative or anything like that, but I certainly give State of the Unions as things come up professionally there. I'll definitely share this podcast there, for instance, when it airs. But LinkedIn professionally probably make the most sense. You can follow me on Instagram if you want to see really cute photos of my kids. So
there you go. And if you are in Phoenix, go to the Press Coffee at 32nd Street in Shea, because it is lovely. And that's where the roastery is, right? Yeah, so it's a big, beautiful location. Unlike the little miniature drive-thrus we have now, it's big and bold, and it's beautiful, and it's got an upstairs and a downstairs, and you can look at the roasting gear. It's freaking dope. So
yeah, it's a sweet cafe, and then also our actual roasters are there roasting in real time, Monday through Friday, and they'll talk to you too. People talk to them all the time, so if you want to know anything about that, you can talk to those roasters. And if I could give a quick plug, we also do coffee classes called Coffee 101. So if anybody's interested in the specialty coffee world, those are hosted every Saturday. We're sold out through January right now, but those are on our website for February and March. And so think of it like wine tasting, but for coffee. It's just a 1-hour class that we do every Saturday, led by our Director of Retail, Andrew. So that would be something really cool if people are interested in this kind of whole world. It's at our roastery, and so you'd be able to see that and learn a little bit about coffee. So.
Well, now I know what I'm going to do on one of my February Saturdays. So
there you go.
That sounds lovely.
There you go.
Sweet, man. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Thanks.
Wanna cause no problems. I just wanna live my life, but I keep on hearing about nonsense. Me and my dons ain't mobsters, but you know when you see imposters, we know how to read them faces, same way you know how to read them comments. If you wanna talk, let's talk, but around here, make sure you're walking your talk is constant.